In this episode, I am going to be reviewing the original classic from 1961, West Side Story. This was directed by Robert Wise and Jerome Robbins. It was written by Jerome Robbins, Leonard Bernstein, Stephen Sondheim, Arthur Lawrence. The choreography was also done by Jerome Robbins. The music was by Leonard Bernstein, and it starred Rita Moreno, Natalie Wood, Richard Beymer, George Chakiris, and Russ Tamblyn. Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies. This is a podcast on YouTube where I explore movies from all over the world and talk about how those stories were told on film. Today I'm discussing West Side Story. I have not seen the remake from Spielberg as of yet, but I plan to. This is about the original from 1961, 60 years ago, over 60 years ago now. It's hard to believe. I actually saw the musical before I saw the film many years ago. My family and I went to see it at a dinner theater production at Stage West when Stage West still existed in Toronto. It's no longer in Toronto. But I hadn't seen the film. My parents had it on VHS for a number of years, actually, and it just was not something that ever really interested in me when I was younger. And about 7 years ago, just over 7 years ago, I actually got cast in a play. I've always loved theater. I haven't really done any musicals, and I was on a bit of a kick of watching film adaptations of different plays and musicals because I was really looking forward to doing this play. And I decided to watch West Side Story. And I remember telling my father it's the first time I'd ever seen it, and he found it hard to believe, actually, because it's such an iconic classic. But I loved it then, and I love it now. And there are things that just from watching it again that I really love, and there are things about it that I don't love at all. So my review is going to be addressing what I love and don't love about the original production of West Side Story from 1961. May as well go with the obvious things that I love off the top. The music, of course, the songs by Leonard Bernstein are just absolutely fantastic. I mean, a film that was loosely adapted from Romeo and Juliet, where you have gang rivals, really tough, rough characters in a musical where they're singing and dancing. That's hard to pull off. That's hard to pull off without, I mean, for me, without it making real, without making it look silly to see rough guys dancing and singing. But they found a way to make a lot of the songs, particularly where the gangs are singing, they have a certain edge, and it just blends organically if they're suddenly dancing, or if they're suddenly singing. For example, a song like "Cool." That song was performed right after one of the leaders of their gang's Riff is killed in the rumble towards the end, and everyone wants to go out and strike revenge. And one of the leaders of the gang starts to say, "We got to play it cool because the cops are going to question us," and so on and so forth. And the song "Cool" comes out, and if you look at all the performers, they're really sweating it out. There's a lot of angst, there's a lot of aggression in that song, as the music was really used in terms of action to tell the people to keep it cool. It works really, really beautifully. And also the Tonight Quintet, when both gangs are on their way to the fight. Also, just the fact that they're on a way to fight, it has the feel, even though it has a real poppy feel to it, something that you can sing and dance to. It has a real edge. It just worked really so well, the music by Bernstein. And of course, the beautiful choreography by Jerome Robbins, who also co directed the film. And a bit of trivia is that he actually was kicked off the set halfway through because he was just doing way, way too much takes, and it was costing the production too much money, the amount of takes he was doing. And so, since he was co-directing it with Robert Wise finished the film, but they were both still credited as directors, and they both actually won Best Director sharing. And I believe that's the only time that's ever happened where two directors directed a film and won Best Director at the Academy Awards. But Robert Wise initially did not want to co-direct a film. I mean, he at this point he was a really, really reputable filmmaker, and he wasn't interested in co-directing. But I think he realized that, hey, why not? It wasn't going to hurt him. At the same time, he had a hit musical, and I think really Wise saw it as an opportunity to just capture it. And I don't mean to say that he just showed up and hit record and acted like some kind of a supervisor, because he does have some certain cinematic touches. I'm not sure if this would have been in the musical. This was pointed out in the recent book I was reading, Robert Wise, The Motion Pictures by J.R. Jordan. I want to thank Joe Jordan for sending me the book. He's going to be a guest on the podcast sometime in the next couple of months. The book is an analysis of every single film that Robert Wise directed, and he points out, if you look at the colors often in Maria's bedroom, or where Maria and Anita worked, or in Doc's, the shop that they frequented, the bar there. If you look at a lot of the colors, they had a lot of red, white, and blue from the American flag, and it really obviously symbolized their, as Puerto Ricans new to America, that they really wanted to embrace the independence and the freedom, and that there's, America was a place of endless opportunities as they saw it. And of course, in the song America, that's the real riff within the Puerto Rican community, was that the men saw it as a terrible place, and the women thought, well, it's a lot better than what we had in Puerto Rico. That's another great song, by the way. And a little later in the video, I'll talk about the relationship between Anita and Bernardo, and how they felt about each other, which I don't believe people have talked about too much, and it's somewhat ambiguous. It somewhat doesn't work, as we see later on after Bernardo's killed. I'm going to get to that a little later in the video in terms of things that I didn't quite care for. And in terms of what I loved, I thought the performances were great. I read that Richard Beymer, who plays Tony, he wanted to play him like a real tough guy when he was faced with the street gang scenes. I mean, he's a guy who's trying to rehabilitate himself, and he's no longer with the gang. He's working, and he's trying to stop his violent past, and he's brought back into it by Riff. But he was really interesting in it because he played it like as the nicest guy ever, and apparently that's exactly what Wise wanted him to do. And I really thought he did a great job. I just believed his tender and softer side, and a sense of leadership that he still had with the gang. Perhaps some more edge, just to see some of the colors of his past, would have been good when he was with the gang, but I still thought it worked quite well. I thought he did a really, really great job. I know that apparently when he was watching it, the premiere in London, he walked out. He just hated I don't know how he felt about it in later years, but he hated it so much. Rita Moreno was great. I know that the guy who played Bernardo, George Chakiris, he won an Academy Award, and he actually played Riff in the Broadway version. Everybody is really, really, really good. Of course, the message of the piece is important in terms of the fact that these people only hate each other for no reason, simply because they're different. And it really looks at the racism that the Puerto Ricans were experiencing at that time, by people who were not Puerto Rican, or mainly white, as the Jets. All of them are Irish. You hear some of them mention Irish, some of them mention Italian, some of them mention Polish, and of course they were the original outsiders, because as you find out, particularly from the police officer, as he's trying to provoke them in a later scene, he's talking about how their parents are, no good immigrants, so to speak, as he, his guy was so awful, as he puts it. But you certainly, you find out that they are also immigrants, and that or at least the sons of immigrants, the daughters of immigrants, and that they are also being treated, bad by people who have been there longer than, let's say, they have. And so that violence and that hate for anyone who's different that they experienced, being either Polish, Italian, Irish, they are now doing the exact same thing to the Puerto Ricans. And these fights are over nothing. It's over a little bit of turf, because they you get the impression they don't have much in their life, and they have rough home lives. And so this gang, this street, is where they feel that they have power. They feel that they own, is being threatened, as they see it, by the Sharks, who are the Puerto Rican gang. So all of this violence and these fights is all just because simply these other people are different, and so we have to kill them, fight them, get rid of them as because they see it as a threat. And in a way, you could say that's the story of America, unfortunately. And of course, at the end, when Tony's killed, Riff is killed, Bernardo's killed, and Natalie Wood has that great speech where she says the only reason you're all doing this is because of pure hate, and it's ridiculous. And it's a really powerful speech, somewhat optimistic as you see the gang members from both sides picking up Tony's body. So you get the impression perhaps tomorrow or the next day in the future will be different, will be better. So it has a somewhat optimistic ending within the tragedy of the ending. Another thing I really liked is the sense of unity between the two gangs is when they were had to deal with the police officers. That I thought had a real authenticity to it. For example, the police officer at one point when he sees them in the bar and he's trying to figure out where's the rumble, where's the fight going to be as the two gangs are planning this fight, no one answers. And he tries to provoke Bernardo at one point, the police officer, and you see Riff sits him down, right? And even as soon as the police officer comes in, they know that they have to act like they're all getting along. Like it was just instantaneous. And even in the beginning of the film, when you see that they cut one of the members of the Jets, he as the police come and question who cut this guy, who started, no one rats on anyone. It's like there's just a certain code, a street code. No matter what gang you're from, you do not talk to the police. Now, the officer, he acts as though he wants them to not get along, but he's terrible at doing it. I mean, he later on when he's trying to figure out where is the fight going to be, he tries to provoke them. He calls them all no good immigrants. He basically says that they're trash and all this kind of stuff. And as he's about to leave, he looks at Doc and he's like, "Yeah, I know what you're thinking." And they tell me this at the police station. Try to understand them and all that. And he just thinks that's nonsense. So his way of doing things is to be rough. And as Doc says, I was sure as hell. He says something along the lines of, "I wouldn't talk to them the way you do," or "I wouldn't," something like that. So I thought that was really, really realistic in that sense. I mean, that's a very kind of street authenticity with the way in which the police were interacting with the gangs, the street, the gang code. No matter what gang you were against, don't talk to the police. I like that a lot. Touching on Wise's direction. Wise was so incredibly diverse. I mean, he did every single genre you can think of. He and succeeded at all of them. War films, horror films, many film noirs, dramas, comedies. He did everything, more than I think any other director had ever done. And you can never tell it's a quote unquote Robert Wise film because he told the story as it needed to be told instead of trying to put some kind of a stamp on it or making it seem like let's let the audience know who the director is. Some kind of signature style. He was really, I think that's why he was so good and why a lot of producers went to him to do, some of these epic films that we look back on now today. What I don't love about this film is that it's rather condensed in terms of the love story between Tony and Maria, for example. It's, they fall in love very, very easily. It all happens within one day. The love scenes are rather corny for my taste. And it's also the fact that because he kills Bernardo, and at first, obviously, Bernardo is Maria's sister, and she's angry. Of course, she'd be furious with him, and very easily he says his side of things. It's because Bernardo killed Riff and that, they were pushing him, they were provoking him, and he just happened so fast. He didn't know what he was doing. I would have thought the fact that she just goes along with that right away, I found that hard to believe. It was like they were just trying to condense it and get to the point so quickly. And then immediately after that, you see Anita come in, played by Rita Moreno, and Anita is Bernardo's girlfriend. So not only is she seeing Maria patch things up with Tony also killed her boyfriend. So at first, of course, the great song, A Boy Like That, which is A Boy Like That / I Have a Love, she tears into her and, says, "How could you, a boy like that, how could you," of course, with song. And then, basically Maria makes her realize right away, well, it's because I loved him. And I know that you'll understand because if you loved Bernardo, you'll understand. And right away, this is when Anita, of course, goes to send the message to Doc because Maria was going to go meet Tony at Doc's place, and she goes to send the message that she can't go yet because the cops were there to question Maria. But I just thought that was rather convenient, rather condensed. I don't think anyone could have got over something like that and moved on to the next point of the scene that quickly. I understand people accept that. I understand people just accept how the story's being told. I prefer a more, I'm not saying that's even musicals or any kind of genre of storytelling, any kind of story is necessarily a slice of life, but we should films should be the films I like anyways are the ones that are more pragmatic or dealt with more realistically. But this one is way too idealistic. The scene, of course, with Rita Moreno nearly getting raped is quite hard to see. It just a bit of trivia was that she had actually been raped when she was young, Rita Moreno. So she was crying take after take because the memories of that. The doing that scene were bringing up those memories, and that's a quite scary scene. That's quite powerful. You see what these guys are capable of. That's another thing that was realistic about the depictions of these street gangs is that it's told with empathy that they have become a gang because they've been treated like dirt all their life. They can barely go home. You never even see them at home. You hear some of the parents' voices every now and then. They have terrible upbringing, so of course it's going to turn to this violence, and then of course it can turn even worse to something like rape that they almost commit in this one scene. Another thing with the relationship that I mentioned earlier between Bernardo and Anita, there's obviously a clear conflict in their relationship that you see in the America song. And he has some, misogynistic and patriarchal views on men and women that in Puerto Rico, the women knew their place, and here that they don't. And she's basically battling him on that and saying, that's what you see in America, and it's done so beautifully. But she also, you don't see much about the relationship, but you get the impression that a big strength of the relationship is that they had a strong sexual rapport. When they're at work and Anita tells Maria about the rumble happening, she's looking forward to it because, as she says, he gets out all of his bad feelings, and then she's basically implying that that's when he's the best in bed. And then, of course, later on during the Tonight Quintet, as they're cutting between the two gangs singing that song, they also cut to Anita, putting perfume on, putting lingerie on. So obviously, she has a strong sexual connection. But it makes me wonder, how much did she really love Bernardo? Maybe that's why she so easily accepted what Maria was saying about loving Tony, and that's all she had the song that you see later. It makes you wonder her feelings for Bernardo. Was it purely just a sexual connection, or was there more to it? That's really open for interpretation. But again, you don't really see too much. But that was something that I thought was interesting in the story and how they managed to have that. Of course, back then censorship was so strong, so they're openly talking about sex, but it's done in a very very subtle way. Even in the songs, when they cut in Tonight to Anita, it's very subtle. It's more in the acting and that she's getting dressed. So that's obviously something that they were able to get back past the production code at that time. Another thing, of course, Rita Moreno is Puerto Rican, and at that time Natalie Wood wasn't, and they actually put a lot of makeup on the actors who were playing Puerto Ricans that weren't. And as Rita Moreno said, they literally dumped them in mud in order to make their skin darker. And she was Puerto Rican, but she had to match their complexion now because they were quite dark. They made them quite dark. And she hated the makeup so much that apparently she said to the makeup person, "Oh my God, I hate this. I'm Puerto Rican. Why should I have to wear all this dark, stupid mud makeup, so to speak?" And apparently he actually had said to her, "Are you a racist?" I don't know if it was a woman or a man. Asked her if she was racist. Oh, it's ridiculous. Obviously, we've come a long way since then. Obviously, back then they would cast people from certain ethnicities to play other ethnicities when it was not entirely appropriate. But That was just a norm back then. But I just thought that was such a, you know, sad story. And, you know, I can understand why she'd be repulsed by the fact that here she is Puerto Rican and they have to make her darker. But all in all, you know, it is a really emotionally gripping film, you know, quite sentimental naturally, but it's quite gripping. It does, I mean, the rumble scenes, the last scene, the monologue scene after Tony dies with Natalie Wood, the songs, the emotions of the song, you know, Bob Fosse, of course, he wrote all that jazz. And he also did Chicago on stage. And you know, he said something along the lines of, you know, you have to musicals are like, you know, when you feel so much that speaking something isn't enough, you have to sing it. And or you know, so every emotion, there's so much more emotion in it that you have to either dance or sing it to get it out. And I certainly see that in this film, because every single song, every single dance, every single scene adds to the emotional life of the characters into exactly what is going on within the story and the relationships that are being depicted for sure. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I hope that you've enjoyed this review. I just want to thank all of my members on Patreon. Thank you for all of your ongoing support. If you're interested in becoming one of my Patreon members and receiving bonus content created by me every single month, head over to patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies. They are all based on polls every month that I put out at the beginning of every single month. You will be very much a part of the decision making as to what I do on Patreon month in and month out. So head over to the link and check it out. And lastly, if this is your first time here, please consider subscribing to my channel by pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the Movies logo. You will see it floating above my head right here in the top corner to your top left. In just a second, just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new videos or when I go live. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you in the next episode.